Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas, sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. David Moffet here, and welcome to the latest episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. And today I'm talking across the Pacific and across the US with Dr. Chris Phelps, who's in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Chris, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Fantastic, David. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great. It's great to have you on the podcast, Chris. We've done some work. We've known each other for about 10 years, but we probably haven't connected for 4 or 5 years because of COVID. You used to come down here. I used to go to the US. And as we were saying before we started recording, I consider you to be one of the ideas guys in dentistry. You know, there's people who do things, and then there's people who think of things and do them, and you're at that far end. You come up with the ideas and then you put them into action. And so when I was making pre-show notes, I thought anything I can get off the internet is probably going to be out of date. So let's ask you, and you've told me about 4 things that you're doing. So we'll talk about that in the next hour, and just catch up on what's happening. And even then, you surprised me as we were chatting that you've done all this and you're still only 47 years of age. So yeah, that's you've had a phenomenal career in the business of dentistry, and that's why I guess I'm talking to you. The Ultimate Dental Podcast is to help dentists get some ideas on how to run a better business. And ultimately, as you know, that's the difference between a dental practice that people enjoy going to work in and own, and a dental practice that they don't enjoy going to and working in. So, Chris, when I met you, I think you had four dental offices. What surprised me was you decided to sell 2, and you sold the best 2, and then you worked in the other 2. And you tell me now that you've now sold both those as well 5 years ago. So, tell me, what are you doing clinically, and what are you doing in the business side of dentistry? Where are you up to?
Yeah, great question, David. You know, it was interesting. So when I sold my 2 best offices and I took over the 2 worst ones, I kind of challenged myself that could I do more with the 2 offices in revenue, profit, free time, right? All the metrics that matter, so to speak. Could I do more with those 2 than when I had the 4 combined, right? With less stress and less headaches and whatnot. And, you know, while it wasn't a straight out of the gate, nice run. When you take over your 2 struggling practices and you don't have others to support them with things like, it's collecting $35,000 a month, as say one of my startup offices, for instance, but was costing me $70,000 a month in expense. When you have 3 other practices and other partners, that's a, investment. When you got 1 other practice and 1 other partner, that's a problem, right? And it's something you can't shake. You can't keep ignoring. And, our brain is funny. If it doesn't understand the root cause of the problem, and if it doesn't think it has the capabilities to solve the problem, it does 2 helpful things, helpful, quote unquote, to protect you. It ignores the problem. What problem? There's no problem, right? Or it procrastinates on the problem. Well, I see it, but I don't have to get to it right now. I don't have to do it. I got 3 other offices. We're doing fine. It'll be okay, right? Well, yeah. I couldn't procrastinate or ignore it anymore. And it forced me to really dig into them. And it kind of changed my mindset from a growth for growth's sake mindset, going from one office to 4 offices in 7 years, to now going to a maximized capacity mindset was what I was really digging into. How do I get the most out of what I've got, these two? And so, a big secret of that to help me along that path was when I saw all these fires going on at the practices and I couldn't put my finger on that root cause, right? What was really behind this behavior? My patients not doing treatment, not referring, not doing reviews. My team, I had to micromanage them all the time. Why do I have to keep telling them to do stuff? Why don't they just do it? And my associate doctor is a whole other animal right there. So couldn't put my finger on why. And then I heard a keynote presentation by behavioral scientist, Dr. Robert Cialdini. And literally it changed my life. Okay. And it set me on a new path. And so hearing that talk, this light bulb goes off in my mind that one of Cialdini's 6 principles of persuasion, as we call it, really was at the root cause of those behavioral issues that we spoke of. And so when I got to learn from Cialdini and became certified to speak on his behalf and started basically using my practices as my laboratory for 3 years, taking these behavioral science research and going, well, if it worked in these studies in this kind of setting, why wouldn't it work over here? Let me try it. And then I got the results. And literally within 3 years later, those 2 offices were out collecting and more profitable than when I had 4. So then I decided to challenge myself again, and an opportunity came up where my associates wanted to buy one of the offices. So I sold it to them. So now I'm down to my original practice that I started with. And I thought, oh, could I do with 1 what I used to do with 4? And really maximize the capacity of this thing? Can we amplify it to another level? And I proved we were able to do that, and added more chairs and doctor time and everything else to do that. But it was kind of a phenomenal run. But for me, I guess what I've learned about myself is that without a challenge, right, without a problem to solve, then I tend to create problems to solve. And that's not necessarily a good thing when you create your own problems, right? You stir stuff up for the heck of it. So I realized I needed to, my destiny was not going to be at the chair forever. So I sold that last office right before the COVID actually hit in early 2019. And I've really just been focusing on other things like working with dentists, as you are, with working on their problems, because I realized our colleagues have no shortage of problems that we can help them solve. I started digging into the pain points of our practices, like the new patient phone calls, right? And what do we do when we can't answer the phone? Like we weren't in my practices, when you can't make an appointment and people don't show. So building a company and a solution around that problem. And what do we do for people that don't have insurance and aren't going to see the dentist because of that, right? That's the first book I wrote that we talked about earlier, the membership plan book. But creating a program around that so that we can kind of attract new patients and then close the back door on attrition. And then it's kind of funny how, as you said, I'm always up to something. It's come full circle. Not 3 months ago, in essence, I was at a 40th anniversary party to celebrate Dr. Cialdini's anniversary of his original book launch, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. 40 years it's been out there, and it's still, Harvard Business Review just listed it again as their #1 business book of all time. It's always on Warren Buffett's list of top 10 business books, and #1 in communication. And what's crazy is it's 40 years later, but it's never been more prevalent and more relevant than it is today, kind of thing. And I was asked to MC and host that anniversary event and speak at it. And then Dr. Cialdini asked me if I would step in and take over as the U.S. CEO of the Cialdini Institute. So that's what I'm up to now. Is I'm building the Cialdini legacy in the States here to start, and in Australia and other countries to come as well.
That's a phenomenal full circle in terms of using the principles of Cialdini's influence book and the 6 principles. And I'm going to ask you which was the principle that
the light bulb,
that was the light bulb. But also the fact now that you're in charge, and there's a lesson there for dentists, there's a lesson there for business owners, and we've heard this, we hear it from Kennedy, that when a speaker dies or an author dies, often their intellectual property dies with them. It's of no value. So the Cialdini Institute will live on longer than Cialdini. And when you said it was 40 years, I know I bought his book just I think 32 years ago. So that's been part of my like he must be 110 years old, but he's not really. He actually wrote that book quite young.
Yeah.
Tell me what that principle was that you applied to the practice.
So it's the principle is called consistency, which we call the commitment principle.
Yep.
And what it states is that when people make a real commitment, take a stand on an issue, put effort or skin in the game into it, whatever that is, but when they really commit to something, there's a lot of social influence on them. There's this external social influence and this internal social influence that people want to be consistent and do what they say they're going to do and follow through. And we know that's true if you think about what we call people who are inconsistent in their thoughts, actions, and beliefs routinely, right? There's no positive word to describe inconsistent people. Flaky, wishy-washy, liars, so to speak, right? So that's kind of the social influence. We don't want others to view our thoughts, actions, beliefs as being inconsistent. And then there's this internal force that you don't want to look at yourself in that way. So it's really, in my opinion, one of the most powerful principles because it's hitting you from two areas, internally and externally. And so what I realized was, hang on. So if you get a commitment, people tend to do. Well, suddenly I realized why my patients weren't doing, why my team wasn't doing, why my associate doctors weren't doing. I wasn't getting a real commitment out of them to do anything. And so I realized, holy crap, if I get better commitments out of them, the behavior might change. And boy, did it.
So what's an example of a commitment that that you sought and received from one of your associate dentists?
Yeah. So prior to this, let's say I'd have an associate come to me and say, hey, why don't you pay for me to go do continuing education? That's a job benefit, right? I feel entitled to that. You owe me that kind of thing. And I would just write the check. Sure, go have fun, learn something. Let's bring it back, make it useful for the practice. They'd get back. What'd you learn? Oh, I learned a few things. Okay. That would never be seen or heard from again in the practice or put into use, right? And so finally I realized, well, I'm just paying for that. They feel entitled to it. They don't appreciate it. So I need to get a better commitment out of them. So I changed the game and I said, here's what we're going to do. Any continuing education course you want to go to, by all means, go do it. But you're going to pay for it. But if it's a procedure or service that you could bring back to the practice that we can bring new revenue in, like and serve more patients with, then here's what I'll do. Then if you need any kind of equipment or supplies to do this stuff, say you want to learn implants, great, go do your implant training. I'll buy the motors, I'll buy the implants, I'll buy the stock, whatever you need to get going. So you'll have the tools you need. And now instead of giving you, let's say 30% of collections for every procedure you do, on this procedure, when you do this, I'll give you 100% of collections minus any hard cost until I paid you back for the course. So in essence, when you look at the end game, I paid for the course, but they had to make two powerful commitments first. Number one, they had to use their own money. And that's one of the highest commitments you can get out of anybody, a patient or whoever you're interacting with. When they put time or money into it, they're committed. And the second thing was they had to do it to get paid back. So by the time they did it and figured out their process and got their speed built up to do those procedures, and it didn't take but a couple when you're getting 100%, right? Well, suddenly now they're confident and the ball just keeps rolling downhill. Away they go. And now I can get out of the way. So I turned something ineffective because there was no commitment into something extremely powerful and a boost to our business because of those two commitments.
Reminds me of a phrase that one of my first employers said to me. He said, dentures will always hurt until they've paid for them. And that's that money commitment. Once they've committed the money, you find your success is a lot more predictable than if they're holding back paying you for things. But really great idea there. And you've already inspired me to reread the Cialdini book. It's probably been 5 years since I picked it up, and it's it's a Bible in terms of what's in there in terms of information. It's just always consistent. And, he hasn't had to rewrite it. It's just a binding truth, and a great use of, again, what a visionary does in dentistry is they take stuff from outside of dentistry and they bring it to dentistry and they make it work. They say that'll work in dentistry, and that's what you've done. Whereas some people say, wonder what other dentists are doing, and they kind of get caught up in the weeds when sometimes the ideas are in like Cialdini's book, or in a fine restaurant, or in a good airline, or in a good hotel that we
Oh
can
yeah.
use in our dental practice.
Yeah. I've learned probably more lessons about what to do about the business of my practices from other industries than I have within my industry, for sure. The problems of business are universal. That's what's cool.
Well, it is. It's, you know, if you've got happy customers, you and I both know if your customers are happy, they're happy to even pay a premium on your service, and they don't care what anybody else charges because they're getting great service from you. But when the service drops, then they start questioning the price, or they start questioning what other people are charging, or doing for that same service. And I say this all the time. You know, my lawnmower guy, he used to say I had the best lawn in the Shire. He'd take photos, he'd put them on Instagram. I didn't care what the guy over the road was paying his lawnmower guy. My guy was stroking my ego. He's mowing it like a cricket pitch, back and forwards. Had a nice pattern on it, and that was it. But the same with women, nail ladies, hairdressers, doctors. It's the same. If you can provide great service and results for your patients, you've got a successful business. And Cialdini, I guess, nuts it down into those principles. The principle of reciprocity as well.
Yep.
Do something for somebody, they're going to do something back for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, liking principle, right? I mean, that's a very basic one. I mean, we like to do business with people we like, right? If I don't like you, I'm not going to say yes to you.
No.
But it's probably one of the most overlooked and underutilized principles in dentistry because nobody has time. We don't have time to make those connections. We don't have time to build relationships with people. We don't have time to create that experience because we found those connections to them and created that great customer service. But it's costing us billions as a result. And ultimately, it's putting our patients in a worse situation when they choose to do nothing because their dental issues don't magically go away. It's just going to cost them more time, money, and pain because they chose to wait. But as you said, unfortunately, and this is what I've realized now, like when you tap into these principles, okay, it's kind of like this balance, right? And so if you use these principles to build better relationships with people, to decrease their uncertainty about why they really need this, to motivate action today, get them in the right mindset, those kind of things, then it's not about the money or whether their insurance covers it or not, right? We've given them something else to use to make the decision. But when we bungle every one of those, then they still need something to use to decide. Well, that's when it's about the money and what their insurance covers, right? So if it's getting to that point and you see this as in your practice, but the good news is, well, I guess bad news is good news. The bad news is it's because you bungled it already. You already dropped the ball on these other things because you didn't see it and didn't know how to tap into it. The good news is you can reverse that and tip the scales the other way. That's the exciting things. Just by changing some small little things about how you communicate with that person, suddenly influences them to take this dental need you're talking about and make them want it, right? And when you influence them to want it, then again, it's not about the money or what the insurance covers.
No, it's a tough sell, dentistry, and so the fact that a lot of dentists out there are still focusing on how many microns their margin is. You and I both see dentists that do bad dentistry but had great practices because people loved them for the way they made their patients feel, and margins that you could click your fingernails under as you're looking at. But you say, who did this? And they go, oh, Dr. Smith, he was such a great dentist. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, he was. I don't know how he made that work.
Well, it's crazy because if you think about it, that's what makes our profession so challenging is that we're telling people what they need. Well, number one, nobody likes to be told, right? We learned as little kids that we didn't like people telling us what to do. So we're in a telling kind of business and it's a need, but what do people prefer to spend their money on? What they want or what they need. Well, most people, unless it's life or death or what we call top of mind, pain in the mouth for us, need doesn't trump want always wins. So, I contrast that to, I did some persuasion training for a group of erectile dysfunction doctors. And their challenge was they were having a hard time getting guys to say yes to treatment. And I was like, guys, you're selling what people want. And this is going to be easy, right? Come over to my world for a minute and let me show you how to tell when you got to tell people what they need. Okay. That's a much harder conversation to have to people. So mastering that art of communication and reframing that for patients so that they want what you're saying. It's like it opens up a whole other door for you in your practice.
Interesting stuff. I think every dentist who's watching this podcast is going to go and get Cialdini's book off their shelf if they haven't got it. They'll go and buy it and revisit those 6 principles. Chris, when we first met, you were, I think, the first dentist that I'd ever heard talking about in-house dental membership plans. And that's been a big part, again, one of those brilliant ideas. Tell me how you got, how that idea popped into your head and how you invented the dental membership plan to solve that problem.
Yeah, good question. So, I had randomly, had just taken over the 2 struggling practices and was, looking for opportunities to increase my marketing efforts, because at that time I was spending $36,000 a month in dental marketing to get 60 new patients for my efforts. And my practices were all fee for service. So we were getting 60 fee for service patients, 30 at one office and 30 at the other. So, spending $36,000 a month, you don't have to be a math major to realize that's not a good check to write every month. Something is obviously not working. So I'm looking desperately for new mediums to tap into. And a patient of mine actually invited me to come do an on-site educational seminar at her retirement community. And this was a active independent living community that was brand new, about 6 miles down the road from the practice, 3,500 homes of independent living, 55 and older people. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, this is like, I should build 4 practices around this thing. Yes, I'll go talk to your people. And I did like a wine and cheese seminar to try to use that wine and cheese as my hook to get people to come, because I didn't think people would come for a dental seminar, but they might come out for a free wine and cheese. And especially good Napa wine, which I just stocked up on, probably a little too much, and needed to make that a new business expense. So I get this room of 60 people, and I'm asking people, hey, no judgment, but how many of you have been to the dentist for any reason in the last year? And only 10 of the 60 raised their hand. And I was like, oh, well, that ain't good. Well, how many have insurance? And the 10 who'd been to the dentist raised their hand. And I was like, oh, crap, I get it now. How many of you would have gone had you had insurance? And the other 50 raised their hand. I was like, son of a gun. There's a barrier there that I didn't even realize, that when these people retired and they lost their insurance, their mindset went from abundance, I got money coming in every month, to scarcity. I've only got a certain amount of money and it's got to make it to the end, right? So everything, they start to grip and hang on to it, and everything's an expense. So they didn't buy dental insurance. But again, in our culture here in the States, that insurance is so ingrained in it. If you don't have insurance, you can't go to the doctor. Their next logical thought is, well, I don't have insurance, I can't go. So they don't. It's crazy. So I saw the problem. I knew it needed a solution. My wife and I had just gone to Costco recently, and I started getting interested in Costco and doing research about this Costco style model of business. And I had heard somebody mention a name about a membership plan, and I thought, we can have a dental membership plan. Why not? I mean, we could do a Costco style for dentistry. I mean, let's just make it affordable, and let me just test it here in this market and see if they'll buy it. And lo and behold, that was one of the big catalysts for growth. How we went from 60 new patients a month to averaging almost 300 fee-for-service patients a month, 170 in one office each month and 130 at my other one. Well, doing those wine and cheese seminars once a month, this kind of grassroots stuff, was a huge catalyst to drive those people in, like 40, 50, 60 of them every month, buying the membership plan. And then what's interesting is now we know from studies that people who have a membership plan, because of the membership plan mindset, spend more money than those that don't have a membership plan. So it's why I noticed that we had higher case acceptance on those patients, because they have a plan, right? It's this idea that they save. as a result. The more I spend, the more I save. That's what happens with Costco. And then to make matters even better, it creates brand loyalty. It stops the attrition, so they stop leaving out the back door. Because think about it, why would they go anywhere else? They're on your plan. Okay, nobody else honors that plan. So this is why you don't see Sam's Club shoppers shopping at Costco, and Costco shoppers don't shop at Sam's Club, right? It locks them in. It's like another anchor to your practice. Besides you and your relationship with the patient, that should be the main anchor. Your team's relationship with the patient should be the second anchor. Now we got a third thing to hang on to them with as a result.
So that's a great story there again, and a great lesson, because you created them this model where they liked you by offering them wine and cheese, which is again a Cialdini principle of reciprocity. I'll give you wine and cheese, you join my membership plan. So that creates a scenario. I wanted to ask you, this worked in your market, but you've rolled this out into other practices of other dentists. Is there a market that it works better in? Is there a market where it's not going to be successful in? Or is it something that'll work anywhere? Because no matter where the dental practice is, there's always a percentage of the population that want that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you have in your area, it's saturated and 90% of the population is on a dental insurance plan, well, your membership plan is not going to get traction. It's going to be a little challenging to overcome that mindset. At least the good news here in the States is that every year the number of people who have dental insurance is going down significantly. In fact, only about a third of the population here has some kind of PPO level insurance, right? So that means 2/3 of the population have nothing. And therefore I see an opportunity
Of course.
for everybody. And so that's why here in the States, I've worked with dentists in almost every state to implement a plan. And if you understand it and know how to communicate it to your patients, and then know how to target communities where these people are, like know who your target market is and know how to find them and let them know that you offer this thing, that's where you can really make it successful. So somebody who starts a plan and doesn't tell anybody about it, well, guess what? It's not going to work. Somebody whose team isn't supportive of this, they don't understand. They're like, why are we discounting stuff? It's like, well, we are and we aren't, because, I raised my fees 10% before I started the plan, and now I'm giving a 10% discount. So guess what? My fees go up every year and the plan stays the same. So it's perceived value is all that is, but that's what we use. Perception is everything.
Yeah. Another great principle there, Chris, of having the team on board and having the team understand. It's not so much on board. They have to actually understand the benefits of what the practice is offering. And ultimately it comes down to, and this is what I tell my clients and their team, ultimately we want our patients of those practices to get their dentistry done because it's about their health. And you mentioned it earlier. If there's a delay in treatment or a perceived or a perception of the patient that they can delay, which is wrong, and it won't be harmful, it will be harmful. So we've got to have our team totally in sync with us, that every time we let a patient go without an appointment and they don't keep that appointment, that patient, we're actually helping that patient commit self-harm to their mouth. And it's not just their mouth now. With the infections in here go throughout your whole body. You've got an infection in here, your whole body's got to fight it. White blood cells aren't made in your mouth, they're made in your bones. So, it's like the mind. You can't say, oh, I'll have these evil thoughts, but they won't affect the rest of my mind. Everything spreads. And and so getting the team on board with you, sometimes as you talked about, in terms of the difficult things for associates to do, is getting the team to see that everything that we're doing is for the benefit of the patient and the patient's health.
Yeah, and here's an easy commitment question you can ask your team to start this ball rolling. Okay, team, is it better for this patient to choose to do nothing? Or is it better for us to use every tool we can to try to influence them in an ethical way to move forward with some of our treatment recommendations, if not the ideal, something. So is it better for them to do nothing, or is it better for them to do something? What's better for their health long term, both today and in the future? Go and let them choose. And most people, I think, who has any education and really training in dentistry will choose that. No, obviously it makes more sense. It's going to cost them more time, money, and pain because they waited. So yeah, of course we should do everything we should. Okay, great. Well, if you truly believe that, then that's why we have this membership plan. Because it's a perceived value of savings, but the truth is, more people choose to do something instead of doing nothing, and everybody wins in that scenario. So let's move forward.
It, you know, when I practiced in my own office, membership plans hadn't been invented, and so it was often very disappointing to find people come, as you said, their accountant would say, "You're spending too much at the dentist," and so they had to go somewhere else. And in fact, I had a patient who turned 80, lovely lady, and she actually said, "Look, I can't afford to come to you anymore. We've outlived our savings." And I said, well, her husband had false teeth, full on full. I said to her, I said, "Look, Thea, I'm happy for you to come and have your teeth checked and cleaned every 6 months on me." And she, she stayed on for another 6 years. There was minimal restorative work to do, but that was just, I just felt, because she said, it was what she was going to do. She said, "I'm going to have to go to the public hospital to get my dentistry done," and that she was not a public hospital person. And I thought this is my gift to her for her loyalty. I couldn't do it for everybody, but I couldn't just blanketly say, "Oh, I'm sorry, bad luck, see you later, here's the door." But it is nice now that with this membership plan that I know when you first started telling me about this, that story of the number of people who weren't going to the dentist because they didn't have insurance anymore. That's that perception that I can only get my dentistry because I've got insurance. So the membership plan just slots straight in there. Hats off to you, Christopher Phelps, for putting two and two together. It's like that scene in Working Girl, with Melanie Griffiths. Costco, insurance, boom, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I often say, I'm really good at digging myself a hole and finding myself in weird situations like that, and problems get in front of me. And then, for the most part, I'm pretty crafty about figuring out the way out of that hole, the solution to get out of it. And usually I figured out, well, the solution usually is pretty good and works for me. Most likely it's going to work for others. So that's what happened there with the membership plan, among others.
Yeah. And now you've built that into a substantial business as well, which you mentioned to me that you're just about to free up some time and sell that as a self-fulfilling prophecy asset for somebody else to take over. So again, congratulations in realizing that it's a business and not just an idea in your own practice.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Now, you also mentioned, I think you touched on it very lightly, about you have a call center, Golden Goose Scheduling. And I think, as I said when we were chatting beforehand, the first time I met you was at a speaking event where you were speaking as a dentist. The next time I met you there, you're in the trade exhibition with this call center. So that's 8 years ago. Tell me how that's been, because that's, again, answering the phone is something that we teach down here, or we coach it. We don't teach it, because teaching is like lecturing, but coaching is nurturing. And it's, anything that can be done, or that has been done, can be done. You can teach, it's just My Fair Lady. It's just Pygmalion. You can teach somebody how to say things in a way which gets results. And Jordan Belfort's the latest version of that. And the movie about him. Tell us about the Golden Goose Scheduling and what sparked that, and how that's grown into, again, another successful enterprise of its own.
Yeah. So I forget who said it, but maybe it was Buddha, but necessity is the mother of invention. Right. So, yeah, a lot of my companies have come out of that. I found myself in a necessity situation and had to innovate a solution. So go back when I said I was spending 36,000 a month in marketing to get 60 patients. Well, the big question was, why in the hell was that happening? Right. And so I spent months listening to phone calls and tracking with call tracking, trying to figure out what the answer was. And I found out the answer was my team between my two offices, even though I had 4 people on the phones, were not able to answer 254 marketing based new patient phone calls every month. So literally I paid for the phone to ring and through marketing sources and nobody could get it. Voicemail, busy signal, or the caller would just hang up. When my team did answer the phone, they only made an appointment 24% of the time. Okay. So people are calling for an appointment and we can't make one. Okay. And we had a 17% no-show rate. So, okay, well, when you look at that statistic, it's not the marketing side of the coin. It's not the leads. It's not the quality or the quantity of leads coming in. It's the lost opportunity side. We can't answer the phone. We can't make an appointment, and we can't influence people to show. So I had to dig into that. And I had a call tracking business for a long time. And so I had marketing tracking data from every major call center in the US at the time because my clients were using them. So I thought if somebody else, like a call center, was out there and had solved this problem magically, well, great, that's what I needed. I'd just pay for it, and that's who I'd recommend. Well, I realized that overall, that across the board, they were worse than our team on the telephone, both in answering and missed calls and conversions and in show rate on top of that. So I quickly realized they did not have the answer figured out. So then now I'm really digging into this. All right, I got to know why. What is the root cause behind why they can't do this well? And once I figured that out, that's kind of how Golden Goose got births, right? So first I started with my own team, hiring people, and I trained them in the principles of persuasion. I trained them in our phone language stuff that I'd come up with for my team. And I started seeing their results, and we just started growing it from there. And then we grabbed another 10 offices and kind of beta tested it with them. And I thought, all right, they're getting more new patients. This is tracking well. One of my buddies was in Canada, and he was like, really afraid. He was like, there's no way that having somebody in Charlotte, North Carolina answer our phones up here in Toronto, people here want to hear Canadians. And I'm like, well, buddy, I appreciate your opinion, but I know the facts. It doesn't matter. So I said, but let's just test it and humor me. He's like, okay. Yeah, we were 100% conversions in Canada between 2 offices up there for over 6 months. So when I say these principles and our issues are universal, I mean that. So we just kept growing from there. And then, now, as you can imagine, after COVID hit and the shutdown and dental offices, I don't know where all of our people went, but they all disappeared. And offices couldn't find people to work the front desk anymore or to be present up there. Even though the patient demand was back, we didn't have the people to support that demand. So after COVID, man, of course, then the call center just really skyrocketed. But now it's kind of cool where right now we're a people company that has some software. But what I'm trying to convert it into is a software company that has some people. So with technology today and with AI, I'm actually working on a voice AI program that I'm teaching our phone language training. I'm teaching the principles of persuasion to, okay, the ethical use of them. And in essence, a patient will literally be talking to an AI robot, and it'll sound like a human voice. And unless we disclose that to them, they'll have no idea. And it will be making their appointments. And now 90% of the appointments will be scheduled by the AI voice, right? And only 10% will need to be handled by real people, which is kind of cool. So that makes obviously what we do a whole lot more scalable and global at the same time.
Wow.
Which is kind of
So you're actually going to be able to replace the human brain answering the phone with an AI generated voice that thinks like a human should think and follow the steps and principles that they should be saying, that they always lose. They always fall off. Because we listen to phone calls, and whenever they go wrong, it's because they forget the steps. It's like baking a cake. You can't put the icing on second. The icing's got to go on last. Otherwise, it's just a mush. Yeah. So that's a great idea. Um, I'll be looking forward to following that. How do you mentioned the language barrier? Canadians don't like southern accents. How do you find
Really, they don't care.
there's because there's I know there's call centers being used in the Philippines and in India um, for for dentists down here, and there's a little bit of
Mhm.
resistance in terms of the. Is that because they're not trained correctly, or um, is that just a social issue?
Well, I think it's a two-part problem. Number one is there's definitely a lack of training because I find a lot of those call centers, um, the people are trying to read a script, right? They're trying to remember some word for word thing, and when you trip them up and ask a question out of sequence, they don't know what to do, and so then they stumble and they freak out as a result. So part of what phone and coaching is all about, as is these are they're guidelines, right? You can't necessarily do word for word scripting; it doesn't work. But if you get off track, you need to know how to bring them back to get them back into the right sequence, so to speak. So better training is definitely going to be required. And at least in the states, I think it's just more uh, pronunciation is key, right? And not talking too fast, enunciating your words well. So we obviously we don't I don't look for the person with the deepest Southern accent to answer Canadian calls. Charlotte at least is a melting pot. We got people from all over the world. Um, but we try to match it up as close as we can. So as long as they're clear, you can understand them, they enunciate well. Most people, no matter where they are globally, will be happy with that scenario compared to what they're used to when they call a foreign call center or they're getting some kind of weird prompt and they can't actually talk to a live person. Hell, half the time people are just happy they got a live person now, right? Instead of a voice prompt, like a dial tree, so to speak. Um, so people are pretty receptive to it. If you take your time with them, listen to what people are actually saying. That's another thing they don't do. Um, that was one of the things I noticed. Like on the phone language stuff, it was like half the time my patient was putting up a barrier to scheduling, and the team wasn't trained on how to deal with that, right, and how to get around that. But honestly, the other half of the time, my team was the one putting up the barrier to scheduling. Okay, they were judging that patient. Oh, I know who this is. Yeah, we don't want them here. Really? Because I do. Right? How do we know who this is? We don't. Right? They could be once they come through this door and they go through our influence systems, they will be a totally different person. So yes, we do want that person here. So getting them out of that bias and that mindset of judging that person and pushing them away was also kind of a challenge too. So I think that could be going on as well.
Yeah, I think a couple of the lessons. There's, sorry, there's one lesson that you've talked about in the membership plan and also in the call center, um, and that's simply that every decision that you've made has been based on research and data, and not just on feeling. And you just mentioned it that people answering the phone sometimes make a perceived judgment that has nothing to do with what that person is really about because they've got some bias. They sound funny, they talk funny, they've got a high voice, a woman with a high voice, a man with a high voice. And yet that person could be completely different, and most often is when we get to meet them face to face. And
Mhm.
so I like the fact that you've done research. And again, in leading into my next question, in coaching, I find when clients come to me and they say, well, I ask them a question, well, I think it's this. I say, no, let's not go and think. Let's go and resolve. So,
Yeah.
why is my associate um, have space in their book? And we found out that, the principal dentist has no fail to attend, maybe one cancellation a day, and the associate has one fail to attend and three cancellations a day. So
Mhm.
it's if they're working with the same team and it's the same pool of patients, then it's got to be what that difference between what those two dentists are saying to those patients that are causing those patients to not value what their next step is. Um, and so again, it's got to be numbers, and you can't argue with true data, but you can argue with perception, and that, again, having a successful office is about making sure that everybody should be the same. All the every phone call should be worth the same value. 20 new patients for the associate should be worth same as 20 new patients for the principal. Really, really important. Getting on to the fourth thing that we were talking about beforehand is that you also have now developed a successful coaching business in dental practices, and that's always fun. I've heard dentists say to me, a good friend of mine thought, well, if I can run, he said, if I can coach people, I can run a successful office. And he found that the problems that they had coaching was sometimes there was just multiplication of the problems in one office. And so it's like, instead of having one headache in one office, you got 10 clients with 10 times the headaches. And that's a challenge in that sort of situation. But you were telling me that you've helped to develop a coaching business from somebody who had a coaching business that was really just their personality coaching, and you've now turned that into a leveraged business. Can you talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, yeah. The company's called Sunrise Dental Solutions. It was started by Dr. Tony Feck, Feck, and Tony started Docs, one of the co-founders there, the Dental Organization for Conscious Sedation. So I learned sedation from Tony in 2004. So he's been a longtime mentor of mine. I've kind of followed him from afar. But what most people didn't know about Tony and his kind of storied career was he had one of the best coaching programs out there for doctors. Like some of his clients who followed his systems were probably the top 1% of dentists in the States as far as take home income and whatnot. And much like I wrote a textbook on dental marketing, Tony wrote a textbook on dental systems. And I realized, wow, pairs nicely with what my philosophies are, and what I teach in marketing and in case acceptance aligns perfectly with his systems, so that putting it all together makes for a pretty dynamic duo of things. And when you combine like that coaching, as you know, when somebody's been there and done that, you can't buy that wisdom. I mean, you can't undervalue that wisdom and that experience that you and I both have, that we can share with the other doctors. And my philosophy was always, like you said, yeah, I got to things early on in life and I did a lot, but you know what? I had to crack a lot of eggs to make those omelets. Because the way I do things is I don't know until I try. So trial and error is a messy game, and you'll break a lot of omelets or break a lot of eggs. But when I get to the omelet, it's a pretty damn good omelet. Right? It looks nice. So remember that context. So if I can save any kind of doctor that I'm working with, or one of my other doctors are working with, that mistake and the pain of that along the way, and shorten their curve to success. Again, whatever success means for them. I mean, one guy I worked with, I coached him right out of dentistry. Right. My thing is, I don't care what your goal is. Let's just make sure you're clear on it, and then we can reverse engineer how you're going to get there.
Yeah, sadly, a lot of dentists don't have goals, and their one goal. In fact, I remember talking to David Maddow about this. 50% of dentists practicing, their goal is just to get to age 65 so they can get out of dentistry. And that's not really a goal. That's a sentence. That's a life sentence. But they've got education debt, and they've got practice debt, and they've got household debt and wife debt, and they're just on a treadmill. And I wouldn't like to be a patient in one of those practices with that going on inside the head of the dentist. Dentistry, as you and I know, when it's done right, is a gift. And in fact, being able to coach dentists so that they avoid the speed humps, they avoid the detours, they avoid the spinning their wheels, and get on that path to success sooner, and that path to success is not just a slight gradient, but you can actually increase the steepness of the gradient so they get to a greater success. That's a great gift to be able to share with dentists who don't really know what they can do with dentistry, and I think in dentistry, if you can, my philosophy has always been that if it has been done, it can be done. And if you can't even do it, you can find somebody who can help you do it in your practice, or can do it for you in your practice as well. So being a coach and having come across Tony Feck, I think that's, again, you've recognised an asset that being underutilized by Tony Feck, and you've now turned that into a system that's being taught by dentists. I think that again, as a dental coach, that's a great asset. A lot of dentists out there want a dentist to teach them, because we know what successful dentists think like, because I often say it's like playing chess with 12 opponents, because you're thinking about all different things in your practice and you still got to treat a patient. But you want everything to run smoothly, and so that's an asset. So hats off to you with the coaching group, and I guess you're putting all those other principles of Cialdini and the call center and the dental membership plan. Your clients are bound for success if they, I guess, follow that yellow brick road that you've laid out in front of them.
Yeah, like I said, there's not many things I haven't screwed up in dentistry. So if I can, but have come back from. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. But if I can help somebody avoid doing it and accelerate their curve faster, that's what gets me excited. And like you said, David, when you see them, their mindset change to this mindset of I have to do this is how we start together, right? I have to do dentistry to I get to do dentistry, or I want to do this. That's a pretty cool transition.
Yeah, it's dental practice ownership is a gift if it's handled correctly, because it allows dentists to live where they want, retire where they want, send their kids to school where they want, if it's done properly. If it's not done properly, it's a ball and chain, isn't it?
It is.
It is.
Big time.
Chris, I really appreciate you giving me this time, and it's 10 o'clock at night over at your place now.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm normally I'm an early starter. I was up this morning at 3:30 getting things done before I had a call at 7:30. So as I said to you, I walk every day 6 miles, and I just got to get it out of the way. Remember, you said about consistency and being consistent and consistent to yourself.
Yep.
And Jane says to me often, she said, I don't know how you do it, but I admire you because it's every day. It's got to be done. Rain, darkness, heat.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
My wife is the same way like that. Yeah, that's awesome. I am not like that. At least when it comes to exercise.
Yeah. Well, some people have that belief, Chris, that the heart only has a certain number of beats in it, and they're not going to wear it out doing exercise.
Exactly. And just think how many I'll save if somebody carries me.
Yeah. Well, Chris Phelps, thank you very much for being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so best way, obviously, you can check out the website for the Cialdini Institute. It's just cialdini.com. So CIALDINI, cialdini.com. You can email me at Chris, CHRIS, at cialdini.com.
All right, that's the easiest way to get you. And just because they're emailing you at Cialdini, you can still talk about the call
anything
center.
you want.
Yeah, beautiful. And
because everything that I do and all my companies, to me, they all relate back to those principles of persuasion. That's what at their core.
Yeah, and how did you find out? Just a last question: how did you find Cialdini's book to start off with?
So one of my mentors, my kind of big three of people who had the biggest impact on me was obviously Robert Cialdini, right? Kathy Kolbe, Kolbe, and the Kolbe concept. That's another one of my certifications, which is how you're all instinctively built, right? So not your IQ, not your personality, but kind of what car are you? What are you going to do and not going to do? And the third one was Dan Sullivan, who started a program called Strategic Coach. And so that's the coaching program I went to for years to really, because I didn't have training in this and how to run my businesses, but I needed somebody who understood the entrepreneur better to ask me better questions and questions I didn't know to ask, right? But because he asked better questions of me, it stimulated my mind and got me thinking about the right way to solve these things and gave me some solutions to solve these things. So Dr. Cialdini's book is, Dan recommends all kinds of books for entrepreneurs, but Cialdini's book is high on his list as well.
There you go. So again, personal recommendation. Often the case. How do you find a good dentist? Ask a few people. And
there you go.
How do you find a good education? Ask somebody, what are the books they've read, and how do you find a good coach? Ask them about their coach. Chris Phelps, thank you again for joining us on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. It's been great talking to you, and appreciate your time. And I'm sure listeners and viewers of this podcast will be in touch to find out how you can help them with their dental practices to, I guess, cut out the roadblocks and get to where they want in dentistry with less speed humps and hurdles. Chris Phelps, thanks for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Always good to see you.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.